Now, campaigners who've lost the latest round of a right-to-die legal battle started by locked-in syndrome sufferer Tony Nicklinson. To discuss the implications of the ruling, we're joined by the Chief Executive of the British Humanist Association, Andrew Copson, and Andrea Minichiello Williams from the Christian League Centre. Thank you both for joining us on Sky News this afternoon. Ladies first, of course. Andrea, you must be pleased with today's decision.
I'm very pleased that the law continues to be upheld for the protection of citizens. We're talking here about the protection of the most vulnerable in our society, and it's good that systems are put in place in order to ensure that they continue to be protected. The law with regard to murder, the law with regard to assisted suicide has held firm and in place now for many, many years. It works and ought not to be interfered with.
And I know that you are disappointed, Andrew.
Yes, I think that anyone who has watched and admired the campaign of people like Paul Lamb, people like Tony Nicklinson and his family, will know that these are not vulnerable people. They are people who have made a decision of their own free will and have a settled determination that they want to end their life with dignity, and they look to the rest of us in society to act with compassion in respecting their decisions. And I think it's a shame that the courts haven't done so. I think it's now time that Parliament and government do so to prevent these people who've suffered so much already having to carry on this long fight through the courts.
Andrea, we heard from Tony Nicklinson's wife, who said that her husband and others are discriminated against because people can commit suicide if that is where they are. They're in the depths of depression. They think there is no alternative. They can take their own life. People who are profoundly disabled cannot. They are being discriminated against.
I think we want to help people that are very depressed not to take their lives. A caring and compassionate society helps people to live, no matter how difficult the circumstances are. It was interesting there that Andrew said that these people that have brought this case were not vulnerable. It was interesting that this has been referred to as a campaign, and indeed it is. It's been a concerted campaign over many years where very determined people want to change the law in order to be able to kill themselves or to have others kill them. But let me say, why the law stands good is it's because it's not protecting the strong, it's there to protect the weak. It's there to protect those that are depressed, who are perhaps just coming to terms with severe disability, and in order to ensure that at that moment, when things are very critical, when things are very difficult, they are not tempted to despair, they are not tempted to death. And indeed, when you speak to many consultants, palliative care consultants, who treat thousands upon thousands of patients over many years, Professor Timothy Morn, Baroness Finlay in the House of Lords, there you will see that when they treat these people and deal with the mental, physical and emotional problems that they are enduring, when they treat them well, there is hardly ever a prolonged and sustained wish for people to end their lives.
OK, Andrew, do come in there.
This is a completely false tension. Of course, people who have incurable conditions of all sorts, who are terminally ill or in whatever condition they find themselves, should have all the assistance and support and help and compassion in the world to give them the sort of life that they want to have. But that same respect for their choices, that same compassion, that same concern for human dignity should also lead us to meet their legitimate desire if they say, I don't have any quality of life anymore, I have a wish to end my life. The medical science that is keeping me alive, that is keeping me going, that has kept me going well beyond the point at which I have any quality in my life, I now look to that same medical science to bring an end to my life with dignity, and I look to society to create the legal framework that will allow me to have that done. There's no tension between supporting people to live the life they want to choose and assisting people to end it when that life has ceased to have quality. They're the same sort of respect for people. So I completely reject the idea that somehow you exclude being able to help and support and enable people who have severe problems if you also have respect for their wishes if they decide they do want to change.
So Andrea, it's about dignity and it's about choice.
No, when dying becomes a treatment option, when dying becomes part of the fabric, the possibility, when people are in very extreme circumstances, or perhaps when they're feeling pressurised by family. It's always, not everything is always benign, and that's why the law is there to protect the most vulnerable, and that's why it needs to continue to be sustained as such, and that is why it's good that the judges have upheld the law in today's decision.
You can build in safeguards. You can build in safeguards to a regime of assisted dying.
We know that.
You can build in adequate protection. It is not beyond the wit of us together as a society to find ways to protect vulnerable people and at the same time to give other people the fulfilment of their wishes. I don't think that's beyond us, and I think that that's really now why government and parliament needs to get involved, because only when we begin to discuss the ins and outs of a possible system will we be able to dispel the sort of part scaremongering and part legitimate concerns that people do have about this.
There is no scaremongering here at all. The ability to protect vulnerable people at the end of life from those that might have malicious intent around them, when this kind of thing is actually lawful, is very difficult indeed. The idea that we would put our health professionals into a position of actually not caring for their patients but having to kill their patients is something
sort of care.
It is
a sort of care.
This is killing. It's not care. We need care, not killing. We need to actually look at how we best help people in this sort of situation to calmly live to a point of natural death.
Sometimes it is a rational decision. Sometimes it is a rational decision for someone to reach that they want to end their life. And in those circumstances, the choice that we face as a society is if we let them suffer through that, whether to let them suffer through that on their own, whether to put the burden on their friends and their family to try and to help them, or whether or not to say, look, this is something that in an age of enormous medical advance, because it's medical advances that have created many of these problems, because medical science can now thankfully keep us alive. In an age of medical advance, there are new ethical problems that we need to consider, and I think in that new world, if we're realistic, we do have to confront the possibility that the medical system, that healthcare professionals may well have a legitimate role in ending a life with dignity. I mean, in some ways, medicine already does this when it, for example, might deliver to a patient such a high dose of pain relief that, you know, the medical professional
that is not assisting in a suicide.
But
that's not assisting in suicide.
It's a matter of degree.
That's helping to deal with the pain. That's very different from asking a medical professional to end a life. And that's what we need to look at.
But what it indicates is that we're not averse to that being a consequence of some medicine. And I would say that an omission to act is just as much a moral decision as a decision to act in that respect. And if the effect of a treatment is to end life, I think that we could do well to follow the example of other countries in the world that have said, look, this is a real problem. We can introduce safeguards, but we can medicalise this as a solution. And I think that's what the majority of the British people want. Between 70 and 80% of people have said they want that. And it behoves Parliament and politicians to try and find a way to meet that legitimate desire.
Final word to you, Andrea?
Well, very often we actually have to look at some of the realities of things that have happened where this has been legalised. So, for instance, in Belgium, there's been a 4,200% increase in euthanasia cases since the passing of their legislation back in 2002. That's very serious. We're going to see many people die if legislation is introduced that do not want to die, and that's something that we need to avoid, if at all possible, in a society that cares about the most vulnerable.
Andrea, your final thoughts?
Well, I think that any system that is introduced has to have really clear safeguards. Vulnerable people should be protected. I think that to say that you go an increase of 4,200% is obviously sounds like a big proportion, but that's an increase from nothing. So of course it's going to be very large. But I would say that any increase would be good, because what it would represent for me and for everyone else in this country who agrees with the principle of assisted dying is people who were previously suffering incurably in a miserable condition and now would have the right to end their lives in the way that they choose, because we've decided that's the compassionate thing to do.
This is the scaremongering. People do not have to suffer.
Some people are suffering to the extent they don't want to live
on Sky
anymore.
News this afternoon, Andrew Copson and Andrea Minichiello Williams. Thank you both.